If I had jumped off a cliff, would you jump too? It's an age-old admonishment and one you've probably heard before. It gets trotted out any time you want to say, look, just because someone else did something doesn't mean that you should do it too. You've probably also heard of the 3 C's, those being Call of Duty, Clash of Clans, and Candy Crush. These are games that are so successful and rake in so much cash that publishers and developers are desperate to get on that bandwagon and steal their crown, trying to emulate these games' success without really thinking about whether or not it's a good fit for their game. After all, why take the risk of creating something original that fulfills a niche that might make a moderate amount of profit when you could go for the surefire giant money pile if you could just steal the crown from Call of Duty? And that's the problem with today's game. It's following Call of Duty straight off that cliff without really stopping to consider whether or not it actually should. After all, both of these are first-person shooters, so surely that's enough reason. It's not, and we'll see that as we take an overly long examination of Sniper Ghost Warrior 2. Sniper Ghost Warrior isn't exactly new. It came out in 2013 and I was given it as a gift. I just didn't get around to playing it. And considering that I'm fairly broke right now, it seemed the ideal time to go back and pick up on untouched games. I was fairly excited to play Sniper Ghost Warrior because, well, I have certain expectations when it comes to sniper games in general. I expect them to be, for example, more tactical and therefore more interesting than Twitch-based shooters like COD, which I find to be a bit too much reliant on reflexes and therefore not as exciting and engaging. I think it's only fair to say that there are a number of reasons that anyone might want to play a sniper game, and we should rattle them off in a list. Now, this list is not in any particular order of importance, so don't worry if for some reason something on there seems to be higher on the list than you would expect it to be. And I'm also not saying that the list is 100% complete. I think that pure objectivity as a reviewer is kind of impossible to a point where it's more important to know the tastes and what someone thinks about certain games so that when you watch the reviews you know their position and where they're coming from in order to see how those align with your own ideas about what should or should not be in a game. So straight up, I'm not going to be covering this like 100% like, oh, you missed some stuff. That's fine. It's not supposed to be entirely comprehensive. It's just supposed to be overly long. So the game kicks us off with a quick briefing followed by what seems like an overly long tutorial. We're told that we have generic bad guys and they're going to do generic bad guy things with a bioweapon, and we need to stop them by infiltrating their base and making our way to a drop-off point. It's basically starting us miles away from our objective and then we slowly fight our way through. Obviously, you're going to kick things off with a tutorial, and that's going to be fine. We learn the basics of movement and shooting, which is pretty much standard, so yeah. There is, however, some problems with this section of the game, in that it introduces some rules which are not exactly followed too tightly. In one of the earlier sections that you've just watched, you can shoot a bad guy through a wall. However, at other points in the game, you can't shoot through walls or crates, despite the fact that the game has already prompted you in this very first encounter to say, yeah, you can totally shoot through those. It's kind of iffy. There's also something here which the game is making abundantly clear, namely, follow my instructions. The scene that you've just watched had basically me preparing to shoot two bad guys. My spotter is going to shoot the other guy, and then I'm given a countdown telling me exactly when to shoot. Here's that exact same sequence where I don't follow precisely what the computer is telling me to do. It's saying, here, shoot this guy, shoot the guy on the right. So I immediately shoot him. At this point, the game then swarms me with enemies from all sides, and I am very quickly outgunned and killed. It's a quick and easy way of introducing the idea of consequences for not doing exactly what you're told, but it does lead to a very serious problem in the game. Namely, the game tells you exactly what to do. And in a tutorial, this doesn't seem too overbearing, but we'll quickly find out that the entire game is like this. It gives you a literal countdown where it's saying you will shoot on 3. If you do not shoot on 3, then you have failed this sequence and I'm going to punish you. It's terrible. And it's not a fault of the tutorial for introducing this idea, because the entire game is like this. So the tutorial does a very good job in teaching you, no, do what you're told. But from a gameplay perspective, it kind of ruins everything else. So we continue on our merry way, and we're introduced to other concepts, such as stealth kills with melee weapons. Basically, we have a guy with a giant knife floating over his head, and we walk up, press a button, and stab him. It's a tutorial, so you can totally forgive it for being super blatantly obvious about this. After this, we are again put into a position in which we are again reinforced with the idea that the game is going to tell us exactly what to do and who to shoot in which order. Now again, we're still in the tutorial, so this isn't absolutely terrible, but it illustrates a point where it takes away from one of the things that I had on my list, and that was a tactical shooter experience. What I mean by that is that I want to have to take that slower paced action where I consider my shots and decide which enemies I need to shoot in which order in order to get through a situation. It's sort of like having a puzzle where if guard A is watching guard B, then I can't shoot guard B because guard A is going to see him, so I need to shoot these guys in this order. The game, however, wants to tell me exactly which ones to shoot, in which order, and with what timing. It takes away from any sort of tension that we would have in these sections, as well as creating these really long, tedious sections where we have to sit and wait for the AI to say, now you're allowed to do X. Which happens a lot. You'll have fixed sequences where the game is quite clearly telling you, look, you can't shoot any of these guys yet. I will tell you when you can shoot, but not now. Wait 2 minutes. And because there's no tension of, oh, am I going to get caught? Should I take the shot now? You're just sitting there and it's boring. It would be far better, for example, in this sequence, where you have a guard who is coming towards your position, threatening to reveal you, to have to think whether or not to shoot that guard and risk exposing yourself, or wait it out slowly and carefully. That could have been a very interesting section. You could have been sitting there genuinely going, am I going to get caught? Should I A, get up and move, repositioning myself in the hopes of not getting spotted? B, take the shot now and hope that I can clear out the other guys? Or C, wait it out and hope that he doesn't actually notice me crouching here in these bushes? Instead, you're simply told, no, you're safe, do this. Just do this. So the game continues with another lengthy walking section, followed by some forced stealth and another section in which we are given detailed instructions on exactly which shots to take, in which order, and where to shoot them. For example, in that sequence, I'm told to shoot a radio. I shot it, but since it wasn't highlighted yet, I'm not allowed to shoot it because the game has not yet told me to shoot it. After this, we're immediately interrupted by set-piece action sequences. In this particular one, The platform which we're sitting on collapses, we're forced to swim up, and we're given the opportunity to stealth through this village. Except that we're not. At first I felt for sure that I had just accidentally failed this section and screwed up. Except as it turns out, I've not failed this section because my AI companion simply opens fire here, alerting the guards. It's time for a set piece section of action in which you have to make quick shots, and yeah, again, it's interesting. It's a change of pace, and it allows you to have sort of tutorialize a section of the game in which you might necessarily have to have a shootout. So again, at this point, I'm still not thinking too terribly of the game, but I don't like the fact that it has put me in a position where I automatically fail a section rather than being allowed to either succeed or fail based on my own abilities. After this, we're immediately dropped into a large, narrow section of what's basically corridors, and it is worth mentioning the map design in this game because it's not going to change. We have sort of a double corridor system, as in you have the actual physical boundaries of the map, which are long, narrow corridors without much room to position or maneuver, and then we've also got a secondary corridor which represents the boundaries of the space that you're allowed to interact with. For example, if you come across a section of the map which seems to allow you to go to a certain point, you can't actually walk there because the map has a invisible boundary, which if you cross it, the game immediately tells you to turn around and gives you a timer, otherwise you fail the game. This is super restrictive on where you're allowed to go and how you position yourself, that it's just another way in which the game streamlines your experience and makes it so that you don't really get to play it your way, you play it my way or the highway. It's also at this point that I noticed that the climb button, which is F on your keyboard, is totally contextual. For example, if you want to climb up on, say, a rock or a ledge or a box, you can't unless it's been pre-programmed that this is a climbable surface. So don't go thinking that you can just go wherever and climb up and use the terrain to your advantage. Things have been laid out for you, and you're going to follow the way those things have been laid out. And there are some fairly good examples of exactly what I mean in this particular shot, where you can see that the game has laid out the path for me with this checkpoint in order to signal this is where you will climb up. Except that I've already gone through this section by going around this wall and shooting everyone, so I really don't need it to be telling me this. And because I never use that checkpoint, the checkpoint remains on screen in this shot where it's miles away, because I was not supposed to go the way I went. I was supposed to do it the way that I've been told to do it. And so we press on until we get to probably one of the more interesting set pieces for this particular section of the map, and that is we have a sniper nest where we need to guide our assault team through a section in which there are numerous enemies. It's an interesting change of pace, and you can totally see the inspirations from Call of Duty sort of paying off here. Whether or not you enjoy the series or not, COD definitely has it down pat when it comes to changing up the gameplay so that it doesn't get stale. Unfortunately, again, this is very, very restrictive and on rails, and we have long since at this point passed the tutorial phase. However, I was still under the impressions at this point that I was playing an incredibly long tutorial. And that's because a lot of control is taken away from the player here. Number one, we're still given orders on which targets to shoot in which order and with what timing. Additionally, we quite often have the camera control restricted to make sure that we can't look around the entire area. That makes it even easier for you to pinpoint exactly who you're supposed to be shooting and when you're scoped up. You can't be looking all over the place to figure out targets and who to shoot. Which is a shame because, again, a more open-ended experience where you had to be careful. You had to use your scope to find all the enemies, figure out where they were, who they're looking at, and whatnot, and then determine the order in which to shoot them in order to get your team through this section would be great. But again, that hand-holding is there the entire way. The game wants you to have this experience, this specific experience, that it is totally against you having any agency at all. And we are already well into the game by this point. It's absolutely terrible. Here's another point. I'm given a choice here of which target to shoot and when. I've got 3 targets, and I need to carefully consider it, surely. Except I don't, because the instant I shoot one of them, the other 2 are automatically killed by friendly fire from my squad mates, which means that my choice isn't really a choice so much as nothing at all. After this point, the game does open up somewhat by taking away your companions and putting you in control of your own destiny. There are sections in which you're no longer instructed on when and who to shoot, and you have to make the decisions for yourself. However, again, we've got problems because in these sections we have small numbers of enemies who don't know where you are and generally have a very obvious pattern in who to shoot and where, and even if you fail, they can't really find you and have a tendency to just crouch down, allowing you to make easy shots. In contrast, we're then quickly back to the same standard pattern of I will tell you when and where to shoot. And in these sections, failure to comply quite often leads with every enemy being magically alerted, followed by them all automatically locking onto your exact position and firing with laser precision. It's really terrible, and it does discourage you from having any sort of notion of planning or agency in your own game. And even on higher difficulty levels, I'm playing through this first on normal and then later on different difficulties. The difference between easy, normal, and veteran difficulties is just how quickly the reticule pops up to tell you how much drop there is when you go to shoot over a distance. Other than that, it still gives you the exact same hand-holding experience, and it still is quite punishing when you want to go sort of off the rails and shoot people in an order that you would like to do. And it continues in this fashion for some time. There are generally small stealth sections which aren't very stealthy because the game warns you in advance that an enemy is coming and that you must now either hide or kill them. If you're going to kill them, then the game will place an icon above their head telling you how you can kill them. For example, if an enemy has a knife above their head, it means that it is safe for you to simply walk up and stab them. If they have a pistol above their head, then there's a chance they'll turn around if you get too close, so you should shoot them with your pistol. If they don't have any icon, then you should hide until they walk past you. It's, again, a very hand-holdy thing, and it's awful. These sections are then interspersed with sections of, like I said, stealth, then small groups of enemies which are easily disarmed and which you are not precisely instructed on how to deal with them, followed by a section in which there is a larger group of enemies and you are given instructions on which order to kill them in. So now is a time to talk about the double boundary system. If you look down at the mini-map in the corner, you'll probably notice that number one, it's got a very sort of linear corridor-like snaking pathways. This is very much to cut down on your ability to see ahead of you and take long-distance sniping shots when you're not allowed to. But there's also that red boundary, which is where you're not allowed to go to even if the physical space exists. An enemy could be over there, they could be shooting at you, you could literally walk over to them and attack them with melee, except you're not allowed to. It's not an invisible wall, it's more of a return to the mission area and then a countdown which automatically fails you and sends you back to the checkpoint if you ignore it. Why is that a problem? It prevents there from being novel approaches to different situations. If you're thinking, man, this bush is in the way and I can't really get a good shot on this enemy, I'm going to go up this cliff face to reposition and get a better shot. You can't do that because this is your sniping position. You will shoot from here. This is the way that we have set things up. There is a section in which you have to climb a hill. The path sort of spirals its way around, and at some point enemies will run down the hill towards you, and you've got to shoot them as they come down firing at you. At the base of the hill there is a tower, a comm tower. You could climb the comm tower and basically get a bead on these guys and shoot them undetected. So you could try and climb this hill the first time, go, oh no, I failed. Wait, there's that tower there. I could go back, I could climb that tower, and I can sort of use my environment and think about things and come up with a new solution. Except you can't, because the game doesn't want you to. That tower is out of bounds. The only thing is an imaginary line which is barring your access from that tower. No, you're not allowed to do that. You will do things the way that we want you to do things. And yeah, I know that I just repeated myself, but it's so frustrating because the game could be so much better, but already we have limitations on camera movement. You're not allowed to look around until we say so. Sections in which you use your binoculars to tag enemies, the camera movement can be literally just taken away from you, so that the AI simply tags all the enemies for you using the binoculars, except it doesn't need to, because all of the enemies are already tagged. They have little arrows floating above their heads that you can tell that they're there, so it's just redundant. It takes away control in order to tag enemies, but it doesn't need to because they're already tagged, so why does it do that? And we get this repeating cycle. This is the end of the second mission, or the second part of the first act, and it's ending in another one of these sort of cliffhanger culmination long distance sniping sections, which seem very impressive. There is an achievement for making a sniper shot from over 1 kilometer away, but all this does is it changes it out so that your standard sniper rifle for a longer range sniper rifle, so that the shooting ultimately feels like you're making the same sort of shots that you were at a smaller distance. It's just like, it's a larger distance, but the zoom is bigger, and this rifle is more accurate, so it feels exactly the same. Which runs contrary to the idea that they're trying to do, which are these set pieces, very Call of Duty style, in which it changes up gameplay constantly for like this big actiony sequence. You're supposed to feel more excited and more involved in this entire experience than you probably are. There's also the criticism here, which I'm going to lay down, that it's very hard to fail these sections. In this section we have 4 companion soldiers who will basically take care of business if you fail. Again, we're not in the tutorial, but the game is very much against letting you screw up. If you screw up and you don't do exactly what I'm telling you to do, I will make sure that it happens that way anyway. And that's a point that I think can be most easily summed up by this shot. At this point I'm supposed to shoot that barrel there, which is going to explode. However, I don't. I shoot that guy, and then he explodes anyway. The game is pretty much saying, look, an explosion was going to happen here. The fact that you didn't do it means that I have to do it for you. And then the action repeats itself. Small stealth section, small number of troops who need to be shot, a large area that needs to be cleared out, all culminating in one of these long-distance shooting galleries, because that's exactly what these are. They're shooting galleries. The enemies are too far away to respond to you, and so there's no way to really fail these sections. And all of that then culminates and an actiony set piece where you run through the jungle and explosions go off all around you. And it's thrilling and it's exciting, and you can't screw this up because it is super heavily scripted. I tried to turn around and actually see where the bullets that were hitting me were coming from, except there weren't any bad guys on the map to shoot at me, so I assumed that the bullets just spawned out of nowhere, or maybe I missed him somewhere. And then bam! We're in the past. Literally, the second mission is set in the past. It didn't really give you an exact date for the first mission, but it's implied that it's present day. So, given that this game came out sometime around 2013, you're thinking somewhere around there, early 2010s. The second mission is set in the 90s. So, it's really jumping back somewhere around 10 to 15 years into the past, which confuses the narrative. But if you thought that Mission 2 was going to pick up the stakes and perhaps become more interesting, then I'm sorry. As you're probably watching right now, there is a section here in which we lie underneath a train and watch soldiers walk past. There is absolutely zero chance of us getting caught because the game has already spelt out, once again, exactly the path we need to take. Hey, let's hide under these trains and walk, and here's the timing when it is safe to come out. Again, very restrictive and removing the tension that this scene is supposed to be probably building for us to go, oh no, there's a great big lot of enemies coming. I've got a bolt-action rifle. There's no way I can fight off 30 guys with submachine guns and assault rifles. So what am I to do? Don't worry, you don't need to use your brain or think or figure anything out. There's no tension. Just do as you're told, as you have been for the past hour or so that you've been playing. And that's pretty much the flavor for the entire second act. It is terrible, and in many ways it's worse. You've got numerous stealth sections in which all the enemies are standing in a big clump facing one direction, making it quite clear on what you're supposed to be doing. Hey, you can't do this. You need to go around the outside edge of a room and then do the same again and again. For example, this section here, I have to figure out how to sneak past all of these guards. And for a while, with all of them clustered up the way that they are, I was sitting around thinking, wow, okay, game, you've actually given me a challenge. I'm going to have to figure out a way to get past these guards, maybe shoot some of them in order to clear the path, and then I realized that the checkpoint marker was pointing me in a different direction. Yep, it's saying, there's a lot of guards there, why don't you stealth past them by literally just going around and ignoring them completely? And this isn't even the first time that they do this. They do it on several occasions where there are large groups of guard, and the answer is to just go to the edge of the map and hug the wall. It's terrible. And some of you might be thinking, oh, Local Fire, why don't you just shoot some of the guys? Have a shootout, change things up. Except, they've already thought of this well in advance. You see, you have a limited amount of ammunition, and you can't pick up ammunition off dead bodies, for example. You can only get them at certain points. And so there are more enemies in some sections than you will necessarily have ammunition to actually shoot them. This means that basically, even if you were good enough to quickly snipe a bunch of guys with assault rifles in close combat, with a bolt-action sniper rifle, you still don't actually have enough ammunition to get through this section. There's a park section in which I thought, surely I can shoot these guys, but no, it turns out you literally can't. There is no way of doing this. You must do it our way. It's our way or the highway. So yeah, the game continues as it has been. Very hand-holdy, very linear, strictly telling you exactly where to go, where to shoot, when to shoot. And that's not the only thing that's falling apart, of course. The narrative's not great either. So if you thought, well, maybe the story will help drive things past this just awful gameplay, well, I'm sorry. Already we've created some confusion in the fact that we're jumping backwards and forwards through time with this story without really giving any context or reason why these events are related. It seems that the Sarajevo mission is not really related in any way to the previous mission, so that's confusing. But that's because it's really got no foundation to build off of. Nothing happened during the first mission. Everything really went kind of smoothly until right at the end when things fell apart, and then it was like, oh, so what? And that's it. The game attempts to hint at the fact that there might be some sort of bad guy who's an American, and to build up some foreshadowing and something of interest, but the initial build-up here is given as such a throwaway line so early on in the story that you literally don't notice it. I had to play through the game a second time, and it was only then, knowing the full narrative, that I realized that, oh, I see what you're doing. You do have some sort of story, and it does sort of tie together. So when we're in Sarajevo with our team, we're introduced to Maddox. He's our spotter / companion for this mission, and he's bringing us in contact so that we can get evidence of atrocities being committed by a certain Russian guy so that the UN will intervene. As it turns out, Maddox is totally a traitor, and he's also a jerk, so it's kind of confusing as to what exactly they want from you in this section. Are we supposed to feel betrayed that Maddox sort of, double-crossed us? It's kind of hard to care because the guy is an ass and unlikable, so the fact that he disappears or something might happen to him is... yeah, I don't care. And there's the fact that going back and rewatching the narrative, knowing where it's going later on, I, again, have an extra layer of not caring because Maddox is a moron. There are points in which he's basically doing things where they're just dumb. He is the one who set you up with this contact, and yet he's always yelling at you that you should doubt them, that you should question what they're telling you, despite the fact that these two guys are working together to screw you over. So why is he trying to raise doubts in your mind about this guy? They're on the same side. Surely he'd be like, yeah, we should trust this guy. He's a good guy. I know this guy. Great guy. Tremendous guy. He should be trying to work it into your mind that, yes, you can totally trust this guy, when secretly both of them are working against you. It doesn't make sense that he's kind of sabotaging his own plan. Not that it matters, because the game is super linear and you can't go against anything that he says. There is a point in which he's like, we're going to assassinate the bad guy, and your character goes, no, that would be wrong. We have a mission to complete. And then he's like, and then you go and assassinate him anyway, because you have to. The plot requires it to happen. And to make this foreshadowing that I mentioned in the first section, that there is an American agent who's working with the bad guys with their terror weapon, it's the fact that it's Maddox. Maddox is the bad guy for the story, and he's betrayed you. And in this final section, we shoot him. We kill him in Act 2. So the fact that he's introduced and there's foreshadowing in Act 1 that he might be the bad guy, the fact that we kill him in Act 2 would totally remove this from the plot, or so you would think.
Multiple contacts in the village. We got 5, 10. A lot. It's clear Marinov doesn't want to take any chances this time. He might also not want a bullet in his eye.
Welcome to Act 3. This time we're in Tibet, and it's It's a nice change of scenery. We've got mountains, it's nighttime, but unlike the nighttime levels in the first section, it's not so horribly dark that we can't see what we're doing and therefore need night vision goggles, making everything have that horrible green filter over them. We're once again on the track of the bioweapon, which has been smuggled out. At this point, if it's your first playthrough, you're sitting there wondering, what the heck did the second section have to do with anything? It doesn't seem like Act 2 ties into the story in any way or shape whatsoever. So that's somewhat confusing, but you've got time to start sniping dudes, so let's get into it. We open up with a section which is like, it's not terrible. It's another section, but we are given the choice of who to shoot and when, and we sort of have to figure things out for ourselves, except that once again this section is incredibly easy. Like, it's pretty obvious who you need to shoot and in which order, so ultimately it kind of feels more of the same rather than anything particularly different and interesting. And yes, the game still holds your hand. It's still got plenty of sections where there is a knife floating above this guy's head, so you're safe to walk straight up to him and stab him rather than survey the area. There are sections where it lays out who to shoot and in which order. There are still sections where you have forced to fail so that you can have a shootout. And some of these are just awful. I should mention the gunplay at some point in this. And the gunplay, it's not satisfying. These shootouts are awful. And it's because you've got a bolt-action sniper rifle and a suppressed pistol. And both of them are not good to shoot with. It would be fine if you had maybe some sort of assault rifle on you that you could bust out when you get cornered and you're forced into these shootout situations. That could be fun and satisfying, but as it is, the feedback for both the rifle and the pistol, they feel weak. They feel like pea shooters. The pistol, there's no real audio-visual feedback to make it feel like it's powerful, but it does one-shot anyone. You tickle someone's pinky with a bullet and they die. In the bolt-action rifle, it's obviously pretty awful to have to use in close-quarters combat because it's slow. You've got, say, 6 dudes who are running at you with assault rifles. The sniper rifle is not a great counter to that because you've got to take a shot, then bolt action, then another shot. It's ugh. So the gunplay feels awful, and there are sections in which you have these forced fail states that you are put into these firefights. It's not fun. And thus the cycle continues with more of the same: stealth section, small shootout, large shooting gallery, etc., interrupted by the occasional set piece. Hilariously, one section involves you shooting down a helicopter which shooting missiles at you. You've got to hit a small window on it or you get killed in one shot. And there's a lengthy cutscene before it. Thankfully, you can skip cutscenes, except when you can't, because in this case, as you just literally watched there, you can't move until the cutscene would normally end, but the cutscene ends with you being hit by a missile. So if you skip the cutscene, you still have to wait the same amount of time for the missile to hit you, so that you can actually start this gameplay section. That being said, when you do finally hit this helicopter, it's very cool. The problem with it is that it's not clear where exactly you're supposed to be shooting. You've just got the helicopter and it's told that there is a compromised section which you should be able to shoot through. And then you aim at the windows and you aim at the blades, you aim at various different things and it doesn't work. But at least you get a cool sniper moment when you shoot that guy out of a helicopter. It's kind of sweet. And then it's on to the final level, which could be totally exciting. You've got Maddox. Yes, he was alive, somehow, after you killed him by shooting him. with a sniper rifle. He is apparently still alive, and now you've got to fight through and kill him while he hides somewhere in the level, moves around, and tries to shoot you. This could have been awesome. Can you imagine that? A sniper duel where you're both trying to move about a level while being sniped at. You got to think about where you're going to move to and how you're going to get there, except you don't, because again, the game holds your hand. You may walk this way at this time. When you need to crouch, I will tell you when to crouch. And Maddox, he occasionally takes shots at you, but only during these preset sections. Never once did he actually hit me with anything. There are sections where he fires blindly into a plank of wood to simulate the notion that he is actually firing on you, but he's not. You can sit there quite happily and he won't hit you. During the final section of the game, you're in a duel in which you've got to figure out where he is in this ruined temple and shoot him before he shoots you. And it doesn't really work because you're on a narrow ledge which you can't move from. The game is once again so linear as to restrict you to say you are here and you can only be here. While Maddox occasionally pops up at windows and I guess he could take a shot at you, at no point did he ever actually do so, and the sniper battle ends really anticlimactically. Once you figure out that he's got sort of a set pattern to where he pops up, you can literally just sit there watching the exact same window, wait for him to stick his head up and kill him. I killed him in both cases with my very first shot. I simply waited for his head to pop up at one of the windows, just sat there, aimed at that window, and when he popped up, I shot him. And that was it. So overall, the game fails in so many ways. The narrative is confused with lots of time jumps. The fact that Maddox is a bad guy is revealed right at the end of Act 2, at which point you kill him, at which point he is then revealed to be the bad guy again, right at the end of Act 3, so that you can kill him again. It's incredibly disappointing because, look, there's no chance for you to build up on this character. It's like, here he is and he's dead. Except he's not. Now he is. Wow, way to really get me a villain that I can want to fight and want to kill. And a story that's not confusing. But beyond that, because I'm sure some of you are going, you don't play shooters for story, Local Fire. You just don't do it. Fine. It fails on so many other levels. Do you remember the list that I put down at the very start of this video? So yeah, that list, the narrative, it's not satisfying. The stealth, the gunplay, and the tactical experience of shooting is all denied to you by the simple fact that everything is so narrowly laid out before you. You don't need to make any decisions. The game will literally tell you what to do, and that takes away from stealth because there is no chance of you screwing up because the game is holding your hand and guiding you through it. You're not making any tactical decisions. You don't have to stand there and go, who do I shoot, in which order, where do I position myself in order to make this shot. No decisions on your part. The game makes those for you. The gunplay is unsatisfying because you're only got that pistol and you're forced into situations where you would not use a sniper rifle, but you have to because it's literally the only thing that you're actually carrying with you, which feeds into the accurate sniper simulation. You're put in a lot of situations where a sniper would not be necessarily, but on top of that I kind of can't commentate on that because I'm not a sniper and I don't exactly know how accurate this is. You've got things like bullet drop and wind speed to factor into your shooting, but you do have that target reticule in order to tell you how much the bullet is going to drop and where it's going to drift to when you shoot, and the difficulty changes just make sure that that sort of assist is a lot slower than it would be. So like on casual difficulty it's very fast, and then you have to leave the reticule hovering over an enemy for a while in order to have it pop up when you're playing it on normal. But because of that, you don't need to make that sort of decisions and calculations that I imagine a sniper would necessarily want to make during shooting. You don't need to go like, okay, he's a distance of 800 meters, which means that this is going to have so much drop, which means that I need to aim this much higher. And why would you want to do that anyway, honestly? I mean, it would be like playing any sort of game with super accurate real-world physics. It would be very restrictive, and it would take away a lot of the fun, which I think is in there. So, real-world sniper simulation? Kind of up in the air about that. I can't really say. Cool sniper moments, on the other hand, you totally get those. It's got that sniper cam, bullet cam thing where you shoot a guy and then you watch the bullet speed across the map to hit him. And it doesn't always trigger, and not even on the shots where you'd expect, like the really long distance shots. Sometimes it will trigger and you're like sitting behind a barrel and the guy's on the other side of that barrel and you get a very short bam. So that's not so cool. There is a feature where you can shoot multiple targets at once, which can be very, very satisfying. The problem with that is the inconsistencies, which can kind of ruin shots, where sometimes you can shoot through that wooden beam, but some of the wooden beams you can't shoot through. Some of the guys have helmets on, which will like stop a shot if you shoot them in the head. Some of them, their helmets don't stop it. Guys with body armor, you can shoot clean through that, but you can't shoot through something else, and it's just it leaves it sort of confusing. And quite often, especially with the long distance shots, you can't tell if a guy is wearing the helmet that you're not allowed to shoot through or things like that. So yeah, that can kind of ruin the cool sniper moments, but they're definitely there. Now, there is a last point on that list, and you're going, you didn't talk about multiplayer at all. That's right, that's on the list. Well, let me tell you something about multiplayer. You see, when this game first came out, there were a lot of people who cheated. And rather than come up with an anti-cheating method in order to stop those cheaters, the publisher simply turned around and said, why don't you all just host private games? And boom, that's multiplayer done. So, you can still play multiplayer to this day, but most of the people playing it are cheating. So yeah, that's Sniper Ghost Warrior 2. It could have been better. It should have been better, but it's not. And it suffers so much from the fact that it is trying to have these big action set pieces, and it's trying to have these breaks where you have different types of gameplay, which is something which is totally cool. It keeps it from getting stale. But this very linear, very scripted, very formulaic gameplay, which is so reminiscent of Call of Duty, does not work with the sniper game. The sniper game, at least from my perspective, from my list, is something that you want to be more open. You want to have to make decisions and choices. You want there to be tactical considerations. And so, Sniper Ghost Warrior falls into the sort of gap where it's not a bad game. It's just painfully average and not very enjoyable. So that's it from me. This has been an overly long critique of a game that nobody cares about. I'm glad that you managed to watch your way through it, and since I have no end planned for this video, I'm simply going to cut it here, and it's going to be really abrupt and terrible.